I'm Tom Martin, and welcome to another episode of the San Francisco Conservative, the podcast series where yours truly, Tom Martin, longtime journalist, having produced stories for ABC News, CBS News, CNN, even covered the White House for a year for the Nightly Business Report on PBS, gets to ask thought-provoking questions, I hope, of a great author, one of my favorite authors, David Parker, based in San Francisco. David is the author of 3 excellent books, collections of essays, each one, Income and Wealth, A San Francisco Conservative, which gives this podcast series its title, and most recently, Rome 476. So, David, how are you, sir?
I'm fine.
Great to see you. Great to see you. It's interesting. I'm sorry, go ahead.
How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Doing very well. Yeah, it's a great time of year. I'm on the East Coast, David's on the West Coast, and so we always kind of meet here online for another stimulating conversation. And what I'm thinking, again, what often comes up in our conversations is that David is a great student of history, going back thousands of years, and so many of my friends who are journalists are kind of oblivious to very relevant, important episodes in history that could really put the challenges of our time in context. And what I'm thinking about right now is the Constitution, our founding fathers here in America, and the Constitution. People are raising, talking about lawsuits and political candidates, and, did people in the White House follow the Constitution, and what does it mean to pledge an oath to the Constitution, and so on. And David, I've really enjoyed your writing on the topic of the Constitution and love your passion and reverence for that document. Why is it so important that we continue to keep the Constitution in mind?
Because the founding fathers got it right. The Constitution is one page. The handwriting was florid, so it's a big page. But you can go to Washington, D.C., and it's on display on an art easel. One page. They looked at 5th century Athens. They decided what they did right and what they did wrong. And they looked at 1st century Rome. They decided what they did right, what they did wrong. And they looked at their own 18th century Age of Enlightenment. 3 great periods in Western civilization. And they just pulled out the best thought. And they made it very general. It's almost like the 10 Commandments. You don't argue. You don't progress forward from the 10 Commandments. You don't progress forward from the Constitution. It's a page. They said many times, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We never heard of abortion rights. We never heard about gay rights without using those words, but that's what they meant. The Constitution can handle that. It's general. Just a few laws on how to create a government, and that only Congress shall pass laws, not administrative agencies will pass laws. Congress, because they're elected, and if it doesn't go right, the people are not going to put them back in office. If you're an administrative agency like EPA or anybody, and you're passing laws and it doesn't work, you're not fired. That's not right. They shouldn't be passing laws. So the Constitution is great.
And how would, just as an observer and as a serious student of history, how would you rate the job that Congress is doing right now as far as adhering to the Constitution?
It seems to me that they're fighting. The fighting in the bipartisan fighting is not new. During the Civil War, it was worse. Before the Civil War. And there's been periods throughout the nation where they're fighting each other, even fist fighting in Congress. This is not so new. The nation is really moderate, and you wouldn't know it by watching Congress in session. And that's because the voting districts in this nation are gerrymandered, so that a Democrat is only running against fellow Democrats and a Republican against Republicans. And how you beat your fellow. If you're a Democrat or a liberal or progressive, you're more liberal than anybody else. And if you're a conservative, you're more conservative than anybody else. That's how they gamble they're going to win. So we have a Congress that's way left and way right, and the nation is in the middle. So the nation is disgusted with how they're behaving. because it doesn't represent the nation. It represents gerrymandered and just personal politics almost. It's yeah, it's disgusting on that level.
Yeah, yeah. I have a follow-up question, and this might be a bit shorter of a conversation compared to some, but I just want to throw in that if you're joining us midstream here, this is a San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series featuring yours truly, Tom Martin, journalist, former ABC, CBS, CNN, asking questions of author David Parker in San Francisco. David being the author of Income and Wealth, a San Francisco Conservative, and the new book, Rome 476. So picking up on that, it sounds like you have great faith in the citizens of this country. You know, you're talking about the extremes, and that whether they're on the right or the left, those in Congress are extreme. Is that correct, that you
Yes.
do have faith in the citizens of our nation?
Thomas Jefferson, at the beginning of the Revolutionary War, made a big announcement. We're going to be creating something that doesn't exist anywhere in the world. There'll be no king or queen. Doesn't exist. The government will be so small you won't see it. There'll be a post office, and there'll be a navy, and a patent office. You won't see it. And everyone will have the vote, regardless of wealth or social status. If you're afraid of that, leave. You're afraid of democracy. And thousands of people left. It's called Canada. And we're going to fight the British, the largest military in Europe. We don't even have a military. He says to the British, you know where I live? It's called Monticello. Come on, burn it down. Come on. These guys were tough.
I guess I forget which of our founding fathers called it a bold experiment. It certainly sounds like a bold experiment.
Yeah. So, and all of a sudden, and we are responsible people. That's what Judge Tocqueville says. He says, "Get rid of slavery. Because you're about to become the greatest country that ever existed. Everybody's responsible for themselves." That's what the founding fathers gave us. And progressives, like woke students, they want a safe place. No, we can't have that. We're afraid of democracy. I'm not afraid of democracy. That's why I have faith. I'm optimistic.
That's great. That's great. So we've spoken about Congress. I'd like to speak. We just probably have another 5 minutes left or so. But in your books, you write about, of course, the three branches of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. There's been a lot of, again, among my journalist friends, there's a lot of talk and debate about the Supreme Court and how the various justices see the Constitution and what their role is as far as the Constitution. They're making decisions about women's bodies and various other, concealed handguns and whatnot. How do you look at the Supreme Court currently?
The purpose of the Supreme Court is to look at legislation that Congress puts forward and says, no, that's not constitutional. And then when they hear a case, that's their job also, to say, that's not constitutional. There's a woman on the Supreme Court now, not the new one, the one who's kind of religious, Amy something.
Sotomayor?
No, the white woman.
I'm not sure.
No.
Oh, yeah, Ina Barrett or something like that.
Yeah. She says, I'm on the Supreme Court. I throw all my personal beliefs out the window when I'm hearing a case. I'm looking at the Constitution, yes or no. I may have personal opinions, but I don't throw them into my decision making. And the Supreme Court said that the Roe versus Wade has no constitutional basis whatsoever. It's one of the worst pieces of legislation the Supreme Court has ever ruled on. It was just political activism at the time, and the Supreme Court buckled to the pressure of the day. It's not constitutional. It's not for a Supreme Court to decide, can a woman have an abortion at 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks? The Supreme Court can't make a decision like that. Throw that to the states. If a state says no abortion, well, move to another state. that's just, he's correct, and the Supreme Court was correct on that, for example. That's their job, to adhere to the Constitution and nothing else.
Yeah. Well, certainly something to think about. I think we're out of time for this current conversation. I hope to pick it up again very, very soon. I'd
Right.
like to thank our viewers and listeners for joining us. And again, I encourage you to visit David's website, davidparkeressays.com. You can learn more about his books, Income and Wealth, A San Francisco Conservative, and Rome 476. You can also find these books available for sale on Amazon. David, any closing words?
Well, you said one thing, that my books give historical examples of current issues, and I'm a person who's been successful in business, so there's an entrepreneurial side to my essays. I give a business person's perspective on current issues. In that sense, my books are very interesting. They're worth reading just for what you're going to learn.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. So great. Well, great speaking with you, and I look forward to the next time. Thank you.
Great. I'll be back.